Can we go? I guess we can go. So welcome everyone to our session at the ICT for Ag conference on leveraging digital solutions and carbon finance, a game changer to engage smallholders in the transition towards regenerative agriculture. I'm Christina Tevis-Gradl of Endeavor, and I'm here also as a co-initiator of Soilify, a new solution that uses satellite data to connect smallholder farmers to the carbon market. And my colleague Michael Anthony will talk about that later on. The session has been curated by Xapa, and Rafael Hara is here and will tell you more about it in a second. I have the pleasure to run you quickly through our agenda, which is packed with a lot of interesting experts that will bring in different perspectives on this topic. I just listened to the previous session on digital solutions to shift to regenerative agriculture, which many of you may have also participated in. And financing was a big theme. Financing is one of the key enablers to scale up regenerative solutions. So here in this session, we'll look a little bit more into how we can connect the growing carbon finance market with the shift to regenerative agriculture and enabling smallholder farmers to participate in that. We'll have, as I said, a packed agenda. We divided our session in two parts. We have a first section that will give you a real-life example of how a digital solution can link small farmers to the carbon market. It's Xapa's Suti initiative, which will be presented by Christian Chateauvieux. And then there will be a discussion around how the pilot is working with other partners in this initiative, Johannes Mössinger of Unique, who developed the methodology, and Mr. Rodrigo from the Rubber Research Institute of Sri Lanka, who is hosting the implementation, or the implementation is happening with rubber farmers. So we'll learn about the challenges and how to advance the implementation of digital solutions in this context, and also what could facilitate the further implementation. So you'll get a little bit of a deep dive and grip on what this means in practice. And from there, in the second section, we'll dive deeper into some solutions to link small farmers to the carbon market. So we'll have Michael Anthony of Earth Analytics India, who is developing the technological aspects of Soilify. We'll have Frank Sloat, as well as Margaret Muisebelt of Rabobank with the Acorn project, which is already operational and has fundraised already 2 funds, if I understood correctly, to link small farmers to carbon markets, as well as Dr. Mio Oka of the Asian Development Bank. And in that discussion, we'll look at how to reach small farmers at scale and how to structure financing mechanisms to provide the right type of funding at all levels, because funding is needed both for the smallholder farmers, but also for the implementing organizations that support them in the shift to regenerative. So without further ado, I hand it over to Rafael, please.
Thank you, Christina. Very happy to be here and co-host this session from our friends from GIZ and Endeavor. I discuss with our guests how digital and financial solutions, such as carbon markets, can be a lever for social and environmental action. Just would like to thank also ICT for Ag teams for the great organization before starting. So regenerative agriculture is one of the most promising concrete solutions for sustainable transformation in agricultural activities. There are many reasons for that. In rural areas, there's a strong need, of course, to fight against social inequalities and poverty in this very complicated, harsh post-COVID context. There's a need to help transform agricultural activities towards more climate resilience too. And also to act for gender action and to enable youth and women inclusion in very aging and maybe male-oriented contexts that are often happening on the field. And more globally, the risk of deforestation, the need for GHG emission decrease and carbon sequestration in a world that is going naturally towards 10 billion people tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, make it a very key solution. And in this expected growing importance of nature-based solutions, carbon markets are quite key. There's a tremendous growth that is expected by lots of players. We've been seeing figures of 50, 100, even $150 billion market in a decade. So, of course, no one has a crystal ball, but what is for sure is that it will be fed by the net zero commitments that are multiplying have been multiplying during the past 3 years of corporations, investors, banks, asset managers. And this huge increase today, it's already growing very, very fast, but it's only a $1 billion market. Makes that it will be probably quite messy with increased risk of greenwashing allegation, but it will also feed an increase of the price and an increase of the means linked with the carbon market. So we are not mixing regulatory and voluntary carbon markets, but on a long term, even with the volatility, it will be probably feeding an increase of the price and probably also a deepening or a decreasing of the gap between regulatory and voluntary carbon markets, and giving more financial means to it. And there's a huge need for it because we remember the pre-COVID estimations to fund the SDGs were of $3 to $5 trillion of additional funding. So it's probably more now. We really need to make the most of non-forest areas. And of course, the social impact is totally key to reinforce credibility of externalities valuation with this very fine example of carbon tons and carbon markets that are already extending to SDG credits, community and biodiversity credits. And it's really very, very key to use this carbon markets also to make advance this idea of externalities valuation. Of course, in all of this context, social equity is key, and social impact must go along with climate action. There's a strong opportunity also to root development programs on the long term, and we will have an excellent example in Sri Lanka with Dr. Rodrigo of the Rubber Research Institute of Sri Lanka, which will be explaining their project there with rubber farmers. And although AFOLU, so agriculture and forest oriented, are only a part of the carbon market, and smallholder oriented carbon programs, even a smaller part, they should be included in this global movement. And it's only a small part also because there are some barriers to this, to the inclusion and the development of smallholder oriented carbon programs. Financial barriers with a quite low carbon price, although probably it's going to change. We've seen that just a bit earlier. And a high cost of monitoring and of issuance of carbon credits, of transaction costs. And there are also some operational barriers with uncertainty, and probably the hardest of all these barriers is the sustainable, long-lasting change of practices among smallholders. And that's, we believe, where ICT and digital solutions come in and can be a game changer in two steps. First, to make possible the initial qualification, the monitoring and the issuance of carbon credit processes, but also to make it possible at an affordable price with a risk management enabling to decrease uncertainty on the emission of these credits, but also on a second step to help retrocede, reward smallholder for their participation, either through financial reward, but also through access to services, access to products such as insurance or tools, and also in a community-based investment state of mind. So we will be discussing on how to foster adoption of practices on the long term, how to overcome these operational and financial barriers. And in this, what we believe is that we really need to have a very farmer-centric approach, a holistic 360 approach of the farm to make it possible that on a long term, adoption of practices are really enrooted in smallholders' activities. For that, we will probably need a mix of low-tech solutions and advanced solutions, and also to be able to demonstrate impact in multi-stakeholder coalition. And that's what we're gonna see in this session and discuss with our two panels. So I will leave the ground with my colleague Christian Chateauvieux from XAPA as well, and he will explain about our SUTI solution, scale-up training, traceability, impact. Thank you.
Thank you, Raphaël. This is Christian Chateauvieux. I'm in charge of digital solutions at XAPA. XAPA is a social purpose corporation established out of France, but operating worldwide. And as a mission-driven company, our purpose is to create operating and investment models that perform economically well, but also drive positive social and environmental benefits. Our team has a number of expertise spanning from sustainability to finance and investments, but also information technology, agronomy, and development. And we do many things at XAPA. We advise companies on sustainability management. We advocate around SDGs, and we also create actionable solutions, one of them being SUTI, that I would like to present to you now. To set the stage, I would like you all to meet Ari, one of our SUTI program participants in Indonesia. Ari is a smallholder farmer cultivating hevea trees for the production of natural rubber. And he runs a 2-hectare family farm. As many of his peers, Ari faces a number of issues. He's flirting with poverty line. He's got difficult work conditions. He's unable to properly invest in his farm due to a lack of access to financial services. And as a consequence, he's very vulnerable to risks, whether these are market risks due to price fluctuations, for instance, or emerging risks linked to climate change and to biodiversity loss. So Ari needs to adapt to be able to face these upcoming challenges, but as many other smallholders, Ari also lacks access to technical and professional training. And unfortunately, this is a quite common situation in developing countries. On the other hand, you have industrial groups who directly or indirectly source their raw materials from smallholders and who are under growing pressure from regulations and stakeholders to reduce their risks and improve their supply chain with regards to deforestation, decarbonation, biodiversity protection issues, human rights, etc. And besides, more and more public and private funders and development agencies are seeking to invest in projects that bring positive impact even down to the bottom of the pyramid. The problem is that reaching out to these hundreds of millions of Aris and smallholders in various commodities in many countries would require massive infrastructure that are not available in developing and emerging countries, let alone rural areas. And this is where our SUTI solution comes to play. SUTI, which stands for Scale Up, Training, Traceability, and Impact, is an initiative which allows to organize scalable training programs to help farmers access good agricultural practices and diversification techniques with the objective of structurally improving their livelihood and generating positive environmental and biodiversity impacts via a reduced environmental footprint. Our solution includes program design and management to orchestrate all of the required human efforts in such an enterprise, digital solutions to scale the programs in a cost-effective manner, and innovative impact-linked finance to boost the economic profitability of the initiative. So with SUTI, we at XAPA plan to train 1 million farmers in the next decade on a number of agricultural commodities to ultimately contribute to more socially inclusive value chains and also to significantly improve farmers' life and work conditions. We have started already with private sector sponsored projects in Asia, and we are now aiming for Africa and South America with public and private cooperation schemes. Our approach involves running training sessions in a hybrid delivery method where we combine face-to-face in-person training with a digital e-learning continuum to provide farmers with the knowledge, the techniques, the tools to increase their yields, diversify their revenues, decrease their production costs, optimize their farm waste reuse. And all of that, when aggregated, will help the farmers move away from the poverty zone and reach and pass a decent living income line. At the same time, we collect data with our digital tools directly from the farmers to measure the actual impact of the training and also to value carbon credits from newly adopted agricultural practices with the goal to ultimately reward farmers for farming more sustainably. Indeed, we know how farming carbon sequestration and greenhouse gas emissions decrease can be assessed and valued. And when a significant proportion of existing farms are eligible to carbon offsets, we can design a new generation of smallholder oriented carbon programs because the SUTI operational scheme, including the digital tools, makes the monitoring of these changes of practices and of the impacts possible at an affordable cost. As a result, part of the revenues that are generated by the carbon program help bear the operating expenses related to the program, and part of them are retroceded to smallholders to secure also their long-term participation. So this enables all of our stakeholders, the SUTI sponsors, the investors, to engage a long-lasting transformation of existing farms towards regenerative agriculture with environmental and social benefits. The digital tools that we have created play a critical role in this setup. We have developed a participant app, which is a farmer-centric, mobile-first, offline-capable web app that is easy to access by the non-digitally savvy farmers and even illiterate ones. And it's even backward compatible with antique smartphones and a good number of feature phones. So this app allows us to disseminate training content and measure the impact in a very cost-effective manner. We have also developed an operational management system to allow us and our delivery partners on the ground to manage all of the operational aspects of the training programs, ranging from participant enrollment to organization of training cohorts, issue management, data assurance control, etc. And last but not least, we have a reporting dashboard that creates an alignment with the program sponsors, industrial groups, and investors on the program progress and on the measured economic, social, and environmental impacts that we target. So clearly, all of these digital tools for us as our key lever to reducing the operational cost of SUTI and to allow us to reach our intended scale that will enable smallholders to benefit from global carbon markets as they transition to regenerative agriculture. And we have almost a kind of low-tech approach when it comes to the participant app that helps reduce the access challenges in the farmers community. And this is of utmost importance given their context. So a last comment, our tools can actually also be used outside of a pure SUTI program. For those interested in SUTI or just in the digital suite of tools, please come to us and we'll be happy to discuss. Thank you all, and turning it back to you, Rafael.
Thank you, Christian, for this presentation. So very happy here to welcome for our first panel two guest speakers, Dr. Lakshman Rodrigo from the Rubber Research Institute of Sri Lanka and Johannes Messinger from Unique Land Use. So we are both partnering with these two great organizations in our programs in Sri Lanka with rubber institutes, and with UNIC in Indonesia, in which their very high expertise on carbon engineering help us to monitor and to calibrate our programs. So very happy to welcome you. Maybe we can start with Lakshman, and can you tell us a few words on what is the Rubber Research Institute and what is your carbon program?
Thank you very much. And shall I share the? Okay, can you see the screen? I think you can see the screen.
Yeah.
And just. In Rubber Research Institute, that's considered to be the oldest research institute in the world on rubber. It started in 1909. Anyway, our main mandate is to provide the required technologies for rubber growers and then industries. But now we are going beyond that, especially in terms of the sustainability, especially assisting to develop the green Sri Lanka, especially as you all know that in last Glasgow, the COP26, that means Sri Lanka even committed to be a carbon neutral country by 2050. And also we have committed to increase our carbon sequestration capacity through the forestry about by 7% by 2030. Therefore, as a government institution, the Rubber Research Institute, with all other stakeholder organizations on rubber, we are geared to support that, especially being the carbon neutral country, and being the next step will be the first step would be the Carbon Neutral Institute. Anyway, especially in doing so, we have targeted, first our target is to especially to improve the livelihood of our poor farmers, especially in non-traditional rubber growing areas. Because rubber initially been confined to the traditional metropolitan areas close to the Colombo city, in the western province. But again, due to land limitation in that area, in addition, also we want to improve the livelihood of the poor farmers, especially in the most impacted zone, we call it Monragala, then the Ampar districts, 2 districts. That's what we are targeted at the moment. Anyway, we are going to expand that to the other poorest district in the country as well. Because Monragala is considered one of the poorest districts in the country. And especially the most farmers, their majority depend on their livelihood on farming, and especially on the rain-fed cultivation, because it is a high risk, especially under climate change, the climatic variability. They are in high risk, even though some seasons they get a good bumper harvest, but they need to have a stable income. That's where we are now trying to push with the rubber, to push them to grow rubber, because to provide them a stable income with rubber, because once it's established, because at the beginning it's quite difficult, but once it's established under this dry climate, then they thrive well. Because there's so many, that means very good case studies we have published on that, because some farms, I can remember the very first farmer, that means they have faced the rubber cultivation, even going for pilgrimage because being a Buddhist country, they much appreciate very much, especially visiting India, the birthplace of the Lord Buddha, because they have given the credible, that means especially ability, improvement with the rubber. On that line, we are going ahead. However, the thing is, especially if you look at all the income what they get from the rubber, and then their family commitment, especially education of their children and those things, the income received from the rubber just not really sufficient to meet all under compared to market. That is where we thought of, okay, why not we consider the carbon trading, because the rubber is gone in these areas the first time, because those lands are devoted for the shifting cultivation, or I can't, that means especially short-term crops has been cleared for so many years, going for short-term crops. Some seasons they don't get any income. That is why we went to develop this project in the Monragalampa district. Under particular project, government started one called, the project is called STAR. That means STAR project, targeting to cultivate 3,000 hectares of rubber, and especially being new areas for rubber, and again we developed the project description for this project for the carbon trading for the voluntary market. Now, at the moment, it has been listed in the registry. At the moment, this validation is going on, and we have scheduled to have the verification for next year, because the area covered is the period covered is 2017 to 2021 5-year period, covering 3,000 hectares with about well over 5,000 smallholder farmers. However, along with this project, we aim to say being our social commitment and this environmental commitment of all the institutions, where we are actually already calculated the carbon footprint of our Rubber Research Institute, and then our sister organizations who are working on rubber with the rubber farmers, that's the Rubber Development Department and Tulsavia. And we want to offset our carbon footprint against what we gain from this carbon project. In addition, all the net benefit what we get from this project, what we thought, actually what we have documented is being the government organization. Everything have been well documented, and we want to put 50% of the net benefit to the community development. With their, we'll have some workshop with the farmers to because money is not going directly giving the farmer directly. What we thought was as a community to give the community benefit, we'll discuss with them and come to the agreement. Okay, these are the benefits we provide you with their consent. 50% will be devoted for that. The next 50% will be used for the expansion of rubber in non-traditional areas, because what we thought was is not good to confine to these farmers, but we want to scale up further rubber cultivation in non-traditional areas. And then again, if you think about the digital solutions, what we required, because especially as initially mentioned, the Rafa and Christine mentioned, it's not easy to handle this sort of project, having over 5,000 farmers, even the 3,000 hectares covering 2 districts is not an easy job. However, at the moment, we have developed a GIS-based web platform for monitoring with the monitoring dashboard, just for database management of the site. Just we are included on the site information, the photographs at the initial stage. All the information has been uploaded. About half of we have completed. However, I think we need to go beyond that, especially when we think about the monitoring, and to build up the confidence about the buyers of the carbon credits. We want to have so many approaches. Then again, as the risk reduction, especially the rubber also being a crop, there are some diseases. Maybe at the moment rubber is thriving well in those areas, but still there may be some threat from the diseases, because we want to monitor those threats, and perhaps fire, even the disease, the fire. Especially in those cases, GIS applications are very much important. At the same time, to have real-time monitoring, the ICT will come in, and that is very much important. Then again, in addition, to give the extra benefits, in addition to the carbon fixation, because we know with our scientific observations, the publications, what we have made, we know that there's so much benefit, environmental benefit we get from with the rubber cultivation, compared to the seasonal crop cultivation, especially temperature reduction in the area, the surface soil moisture, because the small scale experiments we have observed that those have been published. Especially when we are going for the large scale cultivation, that will be some changes in the regional climate, and those should be monitored, because that will be supported for these sort of projects. And in supporting those, we need to have a remote sensing and then the ICT combination to convince, and then have just for the convenience and cost reduction methods. In addition, especially because as you know, the carbon credits will depend on how the plants grow, and therefore the plant growth should be monitored continuously. For that, again, we have to we are planning to develop some models, image analysis. Especially our extension officers, they can go to the field and they can get the images, and then they have some models to develop the gold standard with the photography analysis, and then with the link up with the apps, then automatically everyone knows, okay, how much carbon have been fixed at the moment. Like those information are really important. In addition, also, if you look at the social benefits, ultimately how farmer been well off with the rubber cultivation or with other income, those also can be put into the these systems, and everyone knows, because ultimately what we want is to, build up transparency and the confidence of the buyers of the carbon credits, and then we can have a higher price for the carbon. Ultimately, those things can be converted for the welfare of the poor farmers. That's our aim, I think. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this presentation. Maybe I will leave also Johannes Mössinger present Unique, and we'll get more into discussion altogether for this panel. So thank you. Johannes, please.
Perfect. Thank you, Raphael, for the introduction, and also a warm welcome from my side to the virtual audience out there. So as already pointed out, my name is Johannes Mössinger. I'm an agricultural economist, and I'm working for Unique Land Use. I will also share my slides. I hope it will work out. And here at Unique Land Use, I am heading the section of digital solutions for carbon certifications. But maybe upfront, some words about who we are. Unique Land Use is a consultancy company based in the south of Germany, in Freiburg in the Black Forest. We have 3 departments working in the area of forest management, and agriculture and rural development, and climate. We do this all around the globe, as you can see. So we are not only working in the northern hemisphere, we are also working in the tropics and subtropics. And today we would focus on the climate division, because we are talking about carbon certification, and most of our projects are about helping our clients to get involved in carbon certifications and to come up with projects enabling especially smallholders to participate in the carbon market. We already do this since 15 years. We started 15 years ago with the first project in Kenya with around 20,000 smallholders. And nowadays, as you can see on the map on the right, on the bottom right, we are working also all around the globe in a lot of different countries. So far, we have done 37 projects, and on the top left, you can see the carbon credits we already obtained and which are verified by different carbon standards we are working with, for example, the gold standard or the Vera standard, which might be familiar already to some of you. How does such a kind of project we are supporting typically looks like? You have seen that we worked in the area of RED, but also in the area of SALM. SALM means Sustainable Agricultural Land Use Management, and then also in the area of agroforestry projects. One typical project we are working, for example, at the moment is a project we do together with the Livelihoods Fund and a local NGO in Rwanda, which is called ALCOS. There we are working together with around 30,000 farmers, planting 3.7 million trees, but also working on the aspects of soil carbon, where we work on sustainable soil practices. And the objective here is to sequester 2.2 million tons of carbon. These numbers are somehow important to have in mind, maybe also at this stage, because if you would like to certify a project, this also comes with certain kinds of costs. And if we talk about 2.2 million tons of carbon and 30,000 farmers, this is a size where over 20 years we have then enough money for covering also all the costs related to carbon certification.
Yes, and Johannes, maybe yes, maybe we can get also to this to show how ICT solutions can help monitor and master control that cost, but not only cost, also uncertainty on that are sometimes linked to smallholder-oriented carbon programs.
Exactly. So this would have been exactly the next slide. So Raphael, thank you very much for this question. So thinking about the normal project life cycle of such kind of certification project, you start with a feasibility and then a project development plan. And if you have succeeded with such kind of thing, then of course you go into the project, you step in as soon as is it validated by the standards. And then the actual challenges are coming then normally up, that if you imagine you have 30,000 smallholders and you have to monitor them over 20 years, you need a very good database to understand who is still participating, who is cultivating what kind of trees, what kind of sustainable land use practices are done on which plot. And that's where we're also working in this area. So principally, we help the projects to simplify data collection, simplify data analysis, and to simplify the monitoring of such kind of projects. So this is also quite in line with the type of digital solutions Christian already presented. So this could be for data collection, either, for example, an app in the field where they are enabled to collect the data. It also could be even SMS based. I mean, if we think about such countries in the global south, and if you would like to reach out to them, still other kind of mobile phones have to be used. And also in a lot of projects, we still work with the normal extension service, and then the extension service is the person who brings in digitalization, for example, with a certain tool. All such kind of information then we normally collect on one server. On this server, then we can analyze the data and provide the analysis which are needed, especially for the project itself to run successfully the project. So they have a monitoring platform, as you can see here on the bottom right. So even staff themselves, they can see what they have done in the field. And then also this kind of analysis helps us to report it not only within the project, it also helps us to report it to the donors of for such kind of projects. And it also helps us, of course, to deliver the information for the certification schemes. So that's principally how our systems look like in a very easy way.
Thank you,
and with this, I hand over to you back to Rafael, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both. Maybe my first question that I would really like to have your answers is, carbon projects are often quite long-term, 20, 30 years. How do you see the inclusion and the implication on this long-term of a very high number of smallholders? How can you embark them on this very long-term trip to regenerative agriculture through using the lever of carbon finance? So maybe Dr. Rodrigo, you could start, and before Johannes can also step in and give his own view.
Yes, thank you very much. And that is, the monitoring is an extremely difficult task. And at the moment, our initial plan was to have some sample plots to monitor all the smallholder sites. However, even the sample plots, it should be a reasonable number, and therefore digital solutions are highly important, and especially because what we require really is because especially the plant growth, to make sure the plants are growing well. And if you look at the growth, even there are two elements in it. One is the per plant average growth. Again, variability. Those things should be looked into. The same time, the plant density, the stand per hectare, like those are very much important. That is why we thought it is better if we can. We are thinking of developing some sort of image analysis. Because we know even for rubber, even that would be applied for most of the crops, standard initial planting plan. Because knowing that dimension, how the plants are kept on the ground, and then with the photography image analysis, perhaps we can develop a model to assess how much carbon in the tree. Because at the moment, even with the growth parameters, we have published in the cited journals the how amount of carbon fixed in the rubber trees. Having those publications, the next step would be to have develop that sub model and link with the app where the stakeholder can see how much carbon at a particular time will be in the project. And that would be the, I think, most important one, I suppose, because otherwise even the monitoring, even the physical, even convenience side even is very, very difficult and highly costly. And again, it's not transparent even though, because it can be documented, but try to improve the transparency, we need to have this sort of approach.
So Johannes, please, adoption of practices, data collection, how do you proceed to embark the smallholders in such a trip?
Yeah, especially for rubber, what we thought that our plan is, because especially in these areas, even in the government side, coming at the rubber development department, they have the extension officers. We call rubber development officers. They are working with the rubber farmers, and our plan is to get all these data. At the moment, even the planting also done in that manner with their collaboration, and we do all this assessment with the rubber development officers in the rubber development department. And especially when you're going for digital solutions, and we can provide these apps and all these tools to the extension officers, and then to the farmers as well. And then the extension officer will be the link interface between the farmers and the researchers, of course.
Thank you. Maybe Johannes, and after we'll have another question, but then we really need to leave the ground for Christina and the rest of the speakers and the guest speakers. Johannes, please.
Yeah, maybe two thoughts about this long-term perspective. The first one is, of course, out of a carbon perspective, already at the beginning of the project, we have to point out what it means in terms of working over 20 years with such kind of projects together. So there's a kind of non-permanence and permanence section where we have to describe what are the risks, and related to the risks, also certain carbon credits are then deducted, because there's, of course, a certain uncertainty related to it. Like, this is how technically this is tackled. And then the second thought from my side is, like, how do we deal with this 20 years projects and with the perspective of carbon? And I think the trick in those projects, which I see the most successful projects we have dealt with, is that with the farmers, we normally don't talk about carbon. With the farmers, we talk about yield improvements and we talk about market access. And then, of course, we as a project supporter, we have carbon in mind. So if we then talk about what is improved yield, we think about sustainable soil practices. And of course, they improve the soil carbon. But this is like a second effect. And the same also with improving yields and market access. We think about species which then, of course, or agricultural systems bring more carbon on the ground, agroforestry systems, for example. And working in such kind of way with the farmers together facilitates that we have more successful projects. That's one aspect. And the second aspect, which is also here important to mention, is that in order to do this, we need an extension service. And with the carbon funds, at the end, we pay the extension service. We don't pay the farmer. The farmer is gaining because he has a higher yield or better market access. And that's why he or she is motivated. And with the carbon credits, then we pay the extension service, because we also still believe that this face-to-face contact is quite important in the field. And additionally, a third thought, what is also quite important is, as it is required to collect a lot of data from the farmers still in the field, I think this also gives us the opportunity to really sit together with the farmers and to work with this kind of data with the farmer. Because at the end, this is data which the farmer also could be made aware of, and where he or she could then improve farm management, being aware of such kind of data and translate this into the cultural circumstances.
Thank you. So, of course, you need to have a global approach and to bring more value than what the carbon credits can represent, because even with very high carbon credits prices tomorrow, it will not be enough it can only be a complementary revenue. And depending on the type of carbon credits processes we choose, if we need investment, we don't need investment. That's one just thing I'm sure as a second panel will discuss how to finance it. Probably this global approach and to bring a general services and value services to the farmers are key to embark them on the long term. and to induce this change of practices. So thank you both very much. We have to leave the ground to Christina and the rest of the speakers. It was great having you, and I'm sure the audience has been very interested by your two presentations and answers.
Thank you very much to this first panel. It's a really good start to see how this was implemented in Sri Lanka, and to get a taste of the complexity of implementing such a program and linking the global carbon market with a good size of small farmers in the field that need to change practices. So really nice to see also the details of how this management system looks like. Thank you for that. We're moving on to the second set of presentations, where we have a couple more presentations for you on different solutions that use satellite data to monitor increase in biomass, increase in soil carbon, and thereby aim to make a link between changing practices at the smallholder level and the global carbon market. And we'll first just give you a little glimpse of each of these solutions, and then go into a discussion on the financial markets and what financing is needed at each level. So we start with Esti and Frank Sloot, please.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and I'll share my screen so that you can see the presentation. Okay, I hope this works. Everyone sees the large screen. So as SD, we're working on what we call ecosystem services for smallholder families. And when I talk about we, I mean a number of organizations. So SD in combination with Specialized and VA Impact. We are three organizations working on this together with the help of GIZ. And what we are doing is we're focusing on what we call ecosystem services, and ecosystem services are services related to sustainable soil management, healthy soils, and often referred to as the sequestration of carbon within the soil, but also the increase of water holding capacity of the soil, and obviously one of the most important elements also is the increase in biodiversity, and especially soil biodiversity. The objective that we have is simple but very challenging at the same time. It's helping smallholder families increase their income by fighting climate change. Well, wouldn't it be great if we could make a combination of the two? We think that is possible, and it is possible by applying sustainable soil management practices. Some examples have already been described, but it's practices such as reduced or no tillage, the use of cover crops, biological fertilizers, and many more practices that are available now and that can be applied. That has a positive impact on a number of important SDGs, such as no poverty and decent work and economic conditions, so increased farmer income basically. There is a challenge, which I think we have already heard a little bit about in previous presentations as well, in terms of market access for smallholder farmers in the market of ecosystem services. Obviously has an impact on climate action because of the soil carbon sequestration, as well as on life on land, particularly because the ultimate objective is to get higher resilience of the soils to be able to combat climate change. And lastly, but not unimportantly, there is some discussion, and I think we have a slightly different view in terms of what this means for the farmers. We actually think that ecosystem services should become a part of the income of farmers, and that we should maximize the return of the ecosystem services to the farmers. Imagine that we wouldn't pay for the crops that farmers produce as well. Everyone would find that absolutely strange, I think. And our view is that the same should apply for ecosystem services. That is an additional service that farmers supply to all of us, and they should be rewarded for that in the best way possible. Now, what we have done is we have studied, let's say, the market as it is today, and basically have come to a number of conclusions, and it's a little bit black and white. I understand that there's a lot of gray areas here as well, but a little bit black and white. If you look at the current market for ecosystem services, then the market is very much manual in the sense of it's a project-based market. So you need to have separate projects that need to be certified, each and every one individually, to get approval to, for instance, trade carbon credits. That basically means that it's complex and that it requires a high volume, so a high acreage in terms of the project to be able to spread the cost. I think something that that was told previously as well. Also the additionality so the ability to be able to trade carbon credits means that you need to do something different from what you have done in the past. It's very much based on farming practices. And with that farming practices, obviously it's very good, and farming practices need to be changed because you want to get to a regenerative farming practices that need to be applied. The downside of that is that it has a high reliance on audit cost, and as a result of that, a low farmer reward ultimately from the ecosystem services. And ultimately, all of this leads, I think, to what we are also witnessing today to some extent, which is a low market price, low market confidence, and varying prices of that. So we would like to change that, and that's what that is what we're striving for, and what we think a mature market could look like is something like this, which is instead of having project-based certification and approval, we would like to have a platform-based certification and approval, which basically means that we have a platform that has all the protocols automated and all the qualification for which a project needs to be done automated in such an extent that a project can be certified as a result of that. The result of that is that you have the certification cost on the platform and not on the individual project, which gives you a huge opportunity to decrease cost. Secondly, we would like to move away actually from the farming-based practice, the practice-based approach to what we call a result-based approach. So we want to measure the actual stock increase in the soil, and on the basis of that, create carbon credits and trade those carbon credits. We think that that can lead to a low compliance and audit cost, because it's based on automation, and for instance, remote sensing is one of the important elements that we use for that. And with that, we think we can get to a high farmer reward, and ultimately that should lead to high market confidence and stable prices. Preferably, we would like to also introduce local trading for local parties, because we think that that can provide a premium price. Now, obviously, as this is ICT for Ag, and as we think that the mature market, it also requires a digital solution associated with that. What you can see here on this slide is, let's say, a simple conceptual representation of the digital solution. And I touched upon some of the elements before. So the starting point basically is the protocols or standards or methodologies that are being used, in which we need to make sure that it covers everything that a farmer does. And that usually means both soil sequestration, as well as some agroforestry, as well as greenhouse gas emissions that need to be included there. Those should be automated in the farmer administration platform. Farmers can then apply on that platform. The project that they want to do, or the changes that they want to make, are verified in accordance with those standards. And if that is approved, then the farmer is actually administered on the project, and there is a contractual agreement between ourselves and the farmer. Now, obviously, on the other during the project, we use, and at the start of the project, we use a number of what we call evidence providers, because if you want to be result-based, you need to make sure that you have a very good estimation or measurement of what the actual result is. So there's basically three main sources that we use for that: three greenhouse gas emission data, which is done at the baseline and on an annual basis. Then we use what we call a soil stratification and soil sample approach, which is basically looking at and using satellite imagery as well in terms of establishing the soil condition and defining where to take soil samples in order to get to a 95% reliable baseline. So we do that at the baseline, so at the start of a project and each year. And then thirdly, we want to use remote sensing to create soil organic carbon prediction maps, which basically tell us, okay, what is the increase that we're seeing in the soil organic carbon, let's say in between the two soil sampling periods that we have. But ultimately, we actually think that there is potential for remote sensing to actually replace potentially the soil sampling activity altogether. I'll get to that in a little bit further. Based on that evidence, then that is fed back into the platform. The platform then issues the carbon credits on the marketplace, trades them with buyers, obviously, and then once that is done, there will be a retirement of the carbon credits and a financial settlement with the farmer, obviously. Now, lastly, and then I'll hand over. This is we're talking about remote sensing, and everyone's interested in how remote sensing works, and perhaps Michael will get into a little bit more detail after this as well. But this is, let's say, basically what we're looking at. So at the bottom, you see, let's say, the 20-year horizon that was discussed before, and the increase in soil organic carbon content during those years. So what we're doing right now is we're using soil sampling, and we will continue to use that over a couple of years. But ultimately, we would like to replace that with remote sensing and satellite monitoring. And the satellite monitoring is basically using a number of different parameters, such as reflectance, climatic, morphometric. Basically, what is the elevation, is it mountainous or not? These type of elements, and biological parameters as well. And the amount of data that's being collected is quite complex, and the relationships between all of that is very complex as well. And that's why a machine learning model is being used to actually make sense of all of that, and make sure that on the basis of that you get to a real good estimation of the soil organic carbon that is in the soil. So there are some additional gains that are here, and like I mentioned before, it's not that we're transitioning immediately towards remote sensing. We think this is a possibility. We will continue to use, let's say, soil organic soil sampling to make sure that we have an alternative data source, and that we train the model on the soil samples that are being created to get to the ultimate result. So this is what our intention is. This is what you would call what our moonshot is in terms of soil organic carbon sequestration and the access to this market for smallholder families. Obviously, I think the biggest challenge that we have, and it's been discussed also in the beginning with the Suti example, getting the farmers actually engaged in doing this and keeping them engaged in a 20-year horizon, because that is what we need for these ecosystem services, is going to be the biggest challenge altogether. And that is also where I think carbon financing is very helpful and very much needed in order to help make this change and get these farmers engaged. So with that, I would like to hand over back to you, Christina.
Thank you, Frank, for giving us those also technical details about how the satellite monitoring works. And of course, using satellite data can make the monitoring much more cost effective and efficient if we can get a good level of precision in there. So we have another 3 presentations to go. I would ask all the presenters to really stick to the 5 minutes, or I will let you know when 5 minutes are over, so we can have a little bit of time for discussion at the end. And moving on to Soilify and Michael.
Thank you, Christina. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm just setting up my presentation on full screen so you will be able to follow it. We are Soilify. Soilify is an initiative by Earth Analytics India. It's substantially co-funded by GIZ. And we want to cover two aspects. One aspect that we're covering is the measurement of regenerative agriculture. And the other aspect we're covering is the efforts that can be undertaken to de-risk the shift to regenerative agriculture. We come from a very technical perspective, remote sensing, but an application of remote sensing in insurance. So de-risking crop management practices was our key focus initially. And now we have moved to measuring soils. And that is a particular relevant subject in India, which is our core geography, or South Asia, but India being the core geography that we're looking at, where soil degradation is prevalent, in fact, quite dramatic, with about half of the land in India being counted as degraded land. There are relevant commitments by government authorities to restore land, and that restoration efforts are focused on that land that has been degraded due to crop burning, monocropping, excessive waterlogging, excessive fertilization, all of these factors that are known factors that lead to a nutrient imbalance of the soil. So that's hence the landscape that we're looking at. And the challenge we take on is how can we de-risk the shift to regenerative agriculture, also de-risk it from a financial perspective. So we are currently undertaking a number of surveys with farmer producing organizations in India currently that are engaged or that are shifting to regenerative agriculture, sometimes often for very ideological reasons, also to eventually provide healthy foods for their families. When we surveyed them, we were told that the productivity after changing practices is decreasing substantially, 50–60% in the first year. That decrease is getting more rare, with a decrease of 10% in productivity after the third year. So the decrease is still there, but there's some cost savings. So there's less investment in the pre-sowing period. There is, however, more investment during the season, and particularly in seed management, and there's less investment required in post-season. And now we need to look at what are the different mechanisms that we can help farmers to manage that shift. So conservation finance and carbon finance are probably the two major streams. I'm quoting here from a study that has recently been done by Conservation International, Myrova Capital and South Pole Carbon, where we see a number of investors committed to increasing their investments into conservation or restoration projects, mainly through private debt and equity. But there is a dramatic shortage of projects. First, the projects are very small, because obviously this is something that is just beginning. And second, also the ticket size, the investment size of an individual project is very small, making this a major hurdle for this asset class to develop further. The second opportunity, that's sort of very global, and I think we are beyond that in our discussion today, so I won't spend too much time on this, but I just want to stress the point, this is quoting McKinsey study, how relevant nature-based solutions, and within it also solutions stemming from agriculture, are in order to reach the global reduction targets, and the carbon credits that will come out of this, which will contribute about a third to the total credits required to stay below 1.2 degrees until 2030. Now, what we do is we measure. We measure regenerative agriculture spatially. So we also work in the same project that ST is working. So we're obviously intensively comparing also our technical notes on this. There are different approaches to measure soil organic carbon spatially at high resolution that we are currently exploring. we are using spectral indices, different input layers, and then running AI and ML approaches against it. We're also looking at hyperspectral satellite data that is available from new satellite systems in the course of this year. And secondly, we're monitoring regenerative agricultural practices and then seeing if we can derive from those practices through models to determine the soil organic carbon content. I think I'll stick to my 5 minutes. So I'll leave it here. You find more on soilify.earth, which is our webpage. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael, also for watching the time. Yes, as you pointed out, one challenge is how do we find the projects that can be verified, because it's not yet a broad movement that farmers are shifting to regenerative, and there are issues with that. So that's something we would also like to take up in the discussion at the end. And maybe Margrethe, you already have some first insights on that. So I'm handing over to you to learn a bit more about Acorn.
Thank you. I will start sharing my screen. I hope you can see it correct at the moment. So yes, very happy to be able to present our Acorn proposition. And I think it's comparable to what Frank and Esti are visioning, but they're focused on soil as we are focused on the above ground biomass. So maybe good first the why of our proposition, because Rabobank wanted to make a contribution towards the climate goals and keeping the global warming below the 1.5 degrees. And we wanted, because we are a food and agricultural bank, we wanted to achieve that by focusing on smallholder farmers, especially those who are hit most by the current climate changes. So smallholder farmers in developing countries, because we see that these farmers really struggle with extreme droughts or excessive rain that further degrade their land and also resulting in food loss. So we believe that tree planting amongst food or cash crops, so basically agroforestry design, can help them in battling these challenges. So here a quick overview of an agroforestry system and what it has of benefits compared to a monoculture. I won't go very much into depth, but maybe it's good to emphasize that although we want to support these smallholder farmers making the transition to agroforestry by the carbon that is captured within those trees to be able to sell that on the voluntary carbon markets, we see that this is just a bonus on top of all the other benefits, because improved yields and better climate resilience is much more important to them, we believe. And giving them access to a carbon market can be a bonus on top of that. So what we have envisioned is to build a platform, the Acorn Platform, which is a marketplace on which the smallholder farmer can sell their carbon that is stored on their land in those planted trees to corporate buyers. At this moment, like Frank also said, the barriers for smallholder farmers are too high to have access to that carbon market because of the high monitoring costs, high certification costs. So that's why we came up with solutions for that. And we are now developing a cost-efficient method to measure biomass by making use of remote sensing techniques. Next to that, we have developed our own Acorn standard framework and methodology, which has been approved by Plan Vivo. So that means that all projects that adhere to this framework criteria will automatically be certified. So it's a sort of an umbrella. And also important, we think that most benefits should go back to the farmer. So for every carbon removal unit sold, 80% flows back to the farmer. 10% is retained by Acorn to cover the cost of the monitoring, measuring, certification, and monetizing of the CRUs. And 10% can be retained by the local implementing party to cover their costs of onboarding the farmers onto the platform. So let me quickly share a bit a slide of how the mechanism works. So currently we have around 10,000 farmers already onboarded to our platform. And our first 2 batches of CRUs, carbon removal units, have already been sold to Microsoft, who is our launching customer, but also a second batch to Standard Chartered Bank. So how does it work? We have developed our own algorithms and working together with satellite parties, improving continuously our models through machine learning, artificial intelligence, but also by collecting ground truth data so that we can get a more accurate prediction of the biomass on the plot of the individual farmer. We have our own in-house remote sensing team with data specialists, and they work with the satellite partners to develop further improve the algorithms. So like I've mentioned before, our local partners are very important to us because they provide the technical assistance to the farmers to help them implement a proper agroforestry model. They also do the farmer selection and they check all eligibility criteria. For instance, land titling, a farmer needs to own the land for him to be able to sell the carbon credits that's stored on their platform or their land. So what we do, the local partners collect all the data that is then onboarded into the platform. And once we have the polygons in the system, we can remotely measure the biomass that is on that plot. And then we generate it into CRUs. So we can measure the delta in biomass measured, and therefore we are selling as exposed credits. We also retire these CRUs immediately into our own blockchain register, and they have a durability period of 20 years. And we also keep a buffer pool in case of any reversals happening. And obviously at the other side of the picture, the demand side, the CRUs can be bought by corporates, companies. A quick overview of the projects that are currently running. So they're basically in Africa and in Latin America, and we obviously want to expand countries and also go to Asia as well. And this is kind of the picture what it, yeah.
Oh.
I'll stop. No. Indeed, just a little picture how it looks like.
Great. Yeah, I think that gives us a picture, and it's very encouraging to see that you're already with your feet on the ground in several countries and have sold 2 batches. So also to see there's concrete demand for this, and you've managed to get the whole value chain in place, basically. Seems like you're the furthest ahead here, and I also want to leave some space here for the Asia Development Bank and the presentation by Mrs. Miyoka to see what you're doing in this space.
So let me share the screen. Is this something visible to you now? Okay.
Yeah, all good.
Okay. Yeah, okay, great. So let me quickly start. So wait, sorry, it's not going anywhere. I can't move the screen. I don't know why. Next, sorry. So, ADB is like EBRD equivalent. So we work with sovereign government. We provide sovereign loans to the government. So mainly we work with the government. And for case of India, which I would speak today, we know that we can directly work with the state. Okay, so it really goes without saying that we have so much opportunities, investment gap, because we need 2.5 trillion to reach 2030 targets established before the COP26. And sorry about typo, agriculture sector will need an adaptation investment of USD 206 billion by 2030. So we just looking at this, we have huge opportunities in India. And how are we going to work in terms of climate change? ADB normally finance project at the scale of $100 million to $500 million. So it can be huge to cover one state, or if it's a kind of rural road, but if it's a large irrigation system, it only covers one large project. So what we are doing at the moment is really focusing on the vulnerability, whatever it's a climate change or COVID, the vulnerability of people has to be reduced. And also we used to have a standalone irrigation project, standalone marketing project, standalone road construction project. So we try to add climate change component, meaning like flood control or reducing the vulnerability of people by adding the livelihood supports. And that's what we've been working through the project. And we've started to work with the national government, and then so that we try to establish a new or existing national level programs. That it's going to be the order of like $2 or $3 billion in when it gets implemented at the state level. So we have such program on two areas. One is introducing a climate financing fund. Another area is to water use efficiency. So type of irrigation that use less water for the agricultural practice. That's what we are trying to promote. And also, of course, we need to start working in dry zones like Rajasthan, work on the drought management as well. On the innovation, I'm just going to move to the next slide so that you can look at it. Sorry, I don't know why it's red. So what we, as I discussed, so please keep this confidential because this is under discussion with the government. So we try to propose a new climate financing facility to catalyze the climate financing. So we are in discussion with NGO Foundation and to establish special purpose vehicle. And that will finance grant, long-term debt, and convertibles in some of those climate-related projects. Another one is there's an NABARD. That's an governmental agriculture bank in India. So we want to go back. We want to establish an impact investment fund, and that's more to finance the venture capital NGO banks and projects. And of course, the issue that I'm going to talk in the next slide, so this is a nutshell, but this is really for the information because this is under discussion. So please, if you can keep it to yourself, that's appreciated. And the challenges here is the problem about India, even when we talk about this climate financing facility, too much funds available, too many facilities available. Governments say they don't want it anymore because they're concerned about how they're going to spend it. So the problem is absorptive capacity. And also a lot of climate solutions, as you saw, they are nature-based solutions, right? They're not going to be, it's going to cost a lot more if we construct the concrete walls. 2 billion can go easily, but that's not what we are looking at. So we are looking at the 10 million, 5 million, tiny little project that's going to be very challenging to implement. So the government find it very challenging to spend that much money. And also the problem there is there seems no mechanism to collect data and count on the country's contribution towards nationally determined targets on the climate change. And also, when we talk to the government official, they always say, okay, but it's great, but what do you mean by adaptation project? What are the actual adaptation projects? So we still have to go through the, how this is what we mean by adaptation. That can be counted towards adaptation. So we need to spend a lot on the capacity building. And also there's a sort of cultural issue there. So when we talk about particularly this carbon sequestration, the government officials are not may not be so keen depending on state, because they have a perception that their farmers shouldn't be addressing the problem that's created by the developed economies. So that perception is still there somehow. So again, we need to have a good conversation with the government and also farmers so that they can understand what we are aiming at. So the biggest issue, just to repeat, lack of project preparation skills or capacity, and also need for capacity building. So what we are trying to do is, in the next slide, just to show you, this is a Maharashtra Agribusiness Network project. So we provided $100 million and 2.5 million grant to support. Sorry, this is not exactly related to carbon farming, but just explain, we try to have this kind of marketing project. And then in the step 2, we'll be try to introduce a carbon farming to the farmers that we organize. So we try to build a capacity of 200 farmer producer organization in Maharashtra state, where Mumbai is located. And also the issue is, again, the funds are available, but people don't have access to funds. So we also, through our capacity development support, we prepare them for the leadership and also business plan development. And also we provide a financial support to farmer producer organization in the private sector value chain operators for post-harvest and for processing facility, working capital, and other financial requirements. And the financial support will be provided through financial intermediation loan, meaning through the local bank. And we have a loan to value chain operators, and we try to provide a matching grant to farmer producer organizations in a supporting investment for upgrading existing government facilities. And what I want to, and that's, I think this is the end of my presentation, but just listening to others, I'd like to point out 2 areas because, you know, I'm very happy to hear a lot of examples, but it has to be mainstream. Particularly in India, we have thousands of pilots going on. And that's perhaps the easiest way to mainstream is perhaps pair up with an organization like us so that we can create a national program, and your pilot will be mainstream through the national program. So I will be very welcoming to have an opportunity to work with you in the future. And another area sorry, I just try to look at the you know, a lot of soil data that being collected by you and your groups. Of course, it can be used for the carbon crediting purpose, but I'd like to utilize those data for farmers to increase their production as well, so that we can utilize those in our agriculture-related project. So let me finish here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Oka, and thank you for the invitation to the whole panel to get in touch with you. And yes, there's a lot of pilots going on, which is encouraging. And I think it's also something we see in this session. A lot of good progress is being made on the technological front. But what we heard consistently is that there's a lack of implementation structures on the ground. So if we talk about scaling up these solutions, how are we going to get more farmers, more farmer organizations to adopt these practices and to get under one roof? And that's the question that I wanted to play back to our panel now for very quick responses before I hand it back to Raphael. So Ms. Oka, you've already provided a bit of your approach to develop different types of financing along those levels. Marguerite, how are you approaching it from Rabobank to get more organizations on board?
Yes, thank you. Very nice presentation, Ms. Oka. Maybe it's good to be clear that Acorn is the platform only, and it does not provide the financing to the local farmers, because we are a commercial bank and we cannot reach those farmers in these countries. So what we now tend to work is a lot with our local partners. That can be an NGO or a cooperative or a producer organization. They typically receive the funding and then on-lend it in kind to the farmers. Basically, that last mile is very difficult to reach. And what I see also in the market, there's a lot of funding and a lot of climate finance funds available. But when we look at our projects, the criteria often exclude our proposition because, for instance, NGO are not eligible, or the ticket sizes are too small for our pilot. So that's really a struggle to find proper matching. And at this moment of time, we can match projects one-on-one with potential financiers, but at scale, we would need solution that does provide funding for all these types of projects. So designing eligibility criteria is I think very important. And also, how can we reach that last mile towards the farmer and make it also financially interesting, of course, because if you were to disperse very small ticket sizes, I can imagine handling costs would be way too high, or interest rates would be also too high. So that's a real challenge, I think.
Yeah, that seems to be the challenge we have to all think about next. And Ms. Oka, you invited us to support national programs, which sounds like a great idea. If the Asia development can push that, much appreciated. We're getting to the end of the session, so I want to hand it back to Raphael to wrap up and synthesize what we've heard today.
Thank you, Christina. So thank you all for your presence. It was quite passionate. Thanks to our distinguished speakers, to the ICT for Ag team also for their great organization, and to the audience for the many questions. As I was saying, it was really passionate to see all these operational and financial initiatives to overcome the barriers, to embark the first mile and the more than 500 million of small farms in the world, feeding more or less one out of four human beings. We know that there is no perfect solution. We are all trying very hard, I think, but the emergency make it absolutely necessary to continue and to think about scale and to think about embarking this first mile with a very farmer-centric approach. So maybe three things that have been said that are very interesting. That first, impacting finance, not only carbon finance, but also catalytic finance, as mentioned by Mrs. Oka, for example, are really key in that journey. Certainly, multi-stakeholder coalitions are needed to build strong, long-term solutions based on nature-based solutions, but also to make sure that all kind of interests that are integrated to find balanced solutions. And this maybe the last thing is that the notion of impact measurement and data collection is totally key for that, because without being sure of what we are doing and how we measure it, it's very hard to build these coalitions. So in a few words, I think that this session has been very productive, and so thank you again for all the participants for that. And let's hope that these digital and financial tools that are emerging and promising to be very more and more important can be used for the greater good, and to embark these rural populations we all care about. Thank you very much.